No, I don't think I'm too unusual a woodworker. I mean, y'all tell me, does this sound familiar to you? You're watching other videos, or seeing shop tours, or looking in magazines at a really talented woodworker, and in the background, what do you see? An entire wall filled with nothing but clamps. I mean, isn't the saying you can never have too many clamps? And then you think in your mind, well, I only have about 6. And you turn instantly green with jealousy. Sound familiar? Well, if you're like me, you're a little bit green, jealous of all those guys. Don't worry, we still have Cauls. You see, the advantage of having a whole bunch of clamps isn't just, a pride of ownership of, see my collection? No, there really is an advantage in that you are able to place clamps evenly across a glue up to get even pressure, even contact between the glue and spreading that, between the wood and spreading the glue out. You just get a better bond. Now, if you only have 2 clamps and you're having to glue up 2 boards, like in a panel glue up or something like that, well, you're going to have a lot of pressure wherever the clamps are. And yes, you can do spring joints and stuff like that, which kind of warps the boards so that when you squeeze down on the outsides, the tension stays in the middle. But that tension will always be there. So, if you don't have a lot of clamps, you can turn to Cauls to distribute that force from just 2 clamps across a broader area. So here's a couple examples. You have a panel that you're gluing up. We're looking at the end right there. And I only have 3 boards here. For example, I probably should have 5 or 6. But you're gluing up a bunch of boards to create a wider board. Well, if you're gluing them up, obviously you would have pressure on both sides, like that, to squeeze them together. But generally we will put some kind of clamp in between each board so that they don't flex up this way. And in this situation, you would put a clamp right here and right here. And that would keep most of that momentum down. And if you had 5 boards, you'd have to have 5 clamps. But if you're like me and clamp poor, what you could do is put a Caul, another thick board, very tall, that isn't going to flex that much. And then if you squeeze this side here, it will keep all those in line. And you might also want to put some packing tape over it so no glue will stick to it. But looking at the design, does anybody see a flaw in the thinking? The problem is the Cauls I've drawn are straight. And that's actually not what you want. Imagine if you could somehow get a board the same width. That is important, I'll explain that in a second. But each board had a curve to it. And I am obviously exaggerating here. Now, whenever I squeeze on both of these ends, if I could get this gap to close, the pressure in the middle would be very intense. It would be spread out all over it. And the amount of curve you have will affect how even the pressure is. When it's flat straight across, the pressure is only on the outsides. There's not as much pressure in the middle. So there still could be some deflection. And this is even greater when you're gluing up the boards lengthwise. Because normally you would have clamps all the way across like that. One on top, one on bottom, alternating it so the clamping pressure is even. But with a Caul, you could have that curved board and then just depend upon 2 clamps on either side. And that would distribute the pressure. And that's the key thing. Distributing the power of your clamps over a broader area. Now, how can you add that curve? Well, it really isn't that difficult. The secret is to get a board that is the same length as the board you're wanting to clamp up. You don't want it shorter, and you definitely don't want it longer. Take it out, and then starting from one end or the other with a hand plane, just work your way towards the center. It doesn't take much. We are not talking about a huge amount of curve. Just enough to distribute the force. Now, if you're having to go against the grain, you can always do the lifting mechanism where you start, kind of lift it up. You will end up with just the slightest of curve. Now, why would you not want a board longer than the board you're clamping up? Well, if you look at it like this. If you have a panel that you're gluing up and you have a caul that is just a little bit longer, and you put clamps on the outside of the board, here and here, what's going to happen is all that force is going to be concentrated on your corners. And there's a chance you could actually crush it and defeat the entire purpose of the caul of evenly distributing the power. The one way around that one is that if you are going to be using longer boards, is just put your clamps right there and there. The problem I found there is you either had to put the clamps on top or along the side. You can't put them on your edge, which means that because of the nature of the bars of a clamp, sometimes they tend to clamp at a slight angled pressure, which could warp this interior board. That's why when you're doing a bunch of clamps, you do one on top, one on bottom, one on top, one on bottom to distribute that kind of warpage. And one last thing. Remember, you always want to clamp a caul on the long side. You have a lot more resistance this way than you do this way. So if you're like me and you're clamp poor, consider using Cauls. They're a lot cheaper. So for today's bonus, I want to talk about a video put out by Craft Supplies with Ray Key. But before we do that one, if you like this video, if you like this series or any of my longer form series, please do me a big favor. Like, favorite, subscribe, do all those social medias. Most importantly, tell a friend. And if you want to support this a little bit more, patronize this a little bit more, you can visit my website, wortheffort.com, where I sell a lot of swag, t-shirts, my own woodworking, and some shop-made tools. All those sales really do help subsidize the time I spend making these videos for you. Now, Ray Keys produced with Craft Supplies, and they just published, it's on their YouTube channel, but I kind of rediscovered it recently, a brilliant video on box making. And you're going to see me making a lot more boxes in the future because that's one of my favorite things to do. But this video by Ray really went through a lot of details and a lot of nuance that us craftsmen sometimes do that we forget we do. It's really one of the best entry-level turning videos into the world of box making, and I highly suggest you watch it. Understand though that Ray has a very dry presentation, but the content is just phenomenal. I'll put a link down below to it. It's a video from Craft Supplies on their channel. It's a video, I think it's a DVD excerpt from Ray Key.